And it says the department may provide voluntary protective services by entering into a written voluntary protective services agreement with the parent or other person responsible for the child's welfare for the purpose of keeping the child safely in the home. So if safely in the home is not an option, we're going to out of home. And then it talks about, here it says, reasonable accommodations must be made regarding the time and place of the meetings, and it talks about voluntary protective service agreement, and they can bring another person with them. And then it says, a 30-day temporary out-of-home protective placement or any other terms or conditions agreed upon by the parties that would allow the child to remain safely in the home or allow the child to safely return to the home within the 30-day period, including referrals to other service providers. That's voluntary. So, and I go over that very well with my workers when I was in a field supervisor, because I'm like, first off, tell me what we're doing to keep this child safely in the home. You're here because there's a safety issue, because a child is unsafe. What are you doing? What did you do? It's called a safety plan then. It's now called a present danger plan. What have you done to make sure this child is safe and keep it in the home? And the thing about a voluntary is any party to the agreement, us or the family, can say, I'm done. Get off my porch. We ain't playing no more. Take your ball and go home. Because that is part of what voluntary is about. So we got to turn around and file. So we have to be very careful when we talk about voluntary.
Do I take it from all this discussion that probably the bar is being raised in terms of these voluntary agreements that will result, well, at least potentially, in more filings?
I think, no, I really don't think that I think the bar is not being raised. I think more focus is being on where the bar actually is.
Oh, well.
But I think the fact that you have to look at safety, and I think the SAMPS process will help us better determine whether safety. And out of that, yeah, may come more filings. Also out of that, in some areas, may come a better overall assessment of the family, and so we may be, as Dennis talks, we may be wrapping it up at the investigation point and being done, because we've done an overall assessment and realized, yes, this child is bruised. Yes, they got a spanking, kind of with Bill's example. And the culture they live in permits this, and we've talked to them, we've addressed it, but what other things are making this kid unsafe? Is he going to school? Yep. Clean? Yep. Clothed? Yep. Everything else on? Yep.
But then at the other end, we can find out, gee, but there's mental health issues by birth dad in the home.
Correct.
Chemical dependency issues that may be there. All these other things that are in place that may be also adding to this other potential physical abuse that may be happening. Kids doing great in school. It's just the issues at home that are the problem. Are there services that we can refer? Are there other people that we can put into that home? Can we get them a case manager? Can we get them into a therapist? Very few, very, very seldom are those people already hooked into those kinds of services. So what can we put around them to try to keep them and get them to a place that we can keep those kids where they are? Sometimes they'll cooperate. Sometimes they won't.
Sometimes not so much.
Sometimes that's when we have to go to court, get temporary legal custody, and get the judge to say, no, you will cooperate.
So let's take a quick thing you talked about.
Sure,
Is
quick.
policy. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I have run into a couple of instances where I have suspected abuse, and in one instance I went so far as to call the police and also to knock on the door and see what was going on in the home. And the police came and walked inside the house and came out and said that, yeah, it was a bad situation, but they could be doing better, and that was all I heard. And I called maybe a day or two later and asked if something had been done, if someone had gone to see the family and the children to make sure they were okay, and they wouldn't tell me anything.
You're getting into the confidentiality area, and there's a lot that we can't share, even when you call into us. But that's part of mandated reporting, and kind of where I was going with that earlier was, you suspect abuse and neglect. You don't have to know that this person's a caregiver, not a caregiver, and what the law did when it changed, it didn't change the mandated reporting portion, but beginning October 1, the law changes to where any suspected abuse and neglect of a child is called into centralized intake. So a child abused in a school setting by a school staff member is child abuse, but it's not something that Child Family Services is gonna get involved with. But they're gonna take that report centralized intake and do one of those CFSs over to law enforcement to say, you know, what's doing, which is what we currently do. It's more of an awareness for the public, is the way that that came down. But what we're doing right now, as far as the mandated reporting thing, is we may call back a mandated reporter, you know, especially doctors, lawyers, social workers, police officer, and to get more clarifying information. You won't hear us calling back a non-mandated reporter like grandma or something, because who wants the phone to ring? I have this centralized intake, you were calling us earlier, you know. So when those things happen, we may take information and we'll go out and look at things, but as he was saying, because of the confidentiality statute, we can't say what's going on.
So could I be sure that once the policeman saw the situation, that he went and made,
No.
Can't be sure of that. They are mandated reporters, but what to an officer's eyes, and you know, having worked in that field, I can tell you, it's my third call of the night. I'm back up on reports. I just finished an armed robbery, and now I'm here, and I'm walking in here, and mom's over here, and dad's over here, and they've calmed down. The kid's crying in the middle of the room. It looks a little messy. It's dirty. I'm not going to inspect the kid for bruises and everything. What's going on? Oh no, we got it worked out. All right, and then that usual finger wag of, I have to come back here tonight. One of you's going to jail, which is a stupid thing to say, because then they're preparing to go to jail, so that when I go back there, then the fight starts. So, but the bottom line is, yeah, you learn that as a young rookie. You learn that real quick. The bottom line is the officer in mandated reporting that they may not report, so you call CI.
Give you
so there
a
wasn't
forensic-
anything I could do to make sure that the children were,
No. Short of you calling yourself to centralized intake? No. Because we cover 4 counties out of our office here in Helena. We cover all of Lewis and Clark, all of Broadwater, all of Jefferson, and all of Marr. So about 90,000 square miles. Okay? How they handled that call in Marr County, and Bill can appreciate this, okay? We're lucky if we may get 3 phone calls in 3 months that there was a problem. Let one of the sheriff's officers from Lewis and Clark get called out on that, we'll have a phone call as soon as they leave the home.
Well, they may not leave the home. They may call and say, I want you to send a
Right.
worker out here. This is deplorable.
Because it's also it's a tricky situation. The bottom line is, in some cases, we have certain situations more authority than the police. The policeman can't take that child out of that home if they feel that they're unsafe or there's a problem.
yeah, I thought.
But they need to call us
They
so
can-
that we
They
can.
can remove by statute, but
I
yeah,
thought
they-
the children should have been taken immediately out of the home. So-
Yeah. Yeah. It's.
And that's where it gets down to, when he's talking minimum standard of care, that's where we look at what is the safety issue. So while a police officer may not see it and everything, you may be calling in and saying, you know what? I hear the fighting, I hear the screaming, things are getting thrown. These kids are, you know, are in this situation, and there's domestic violence, and, you know, police have been to the house 2 or 3 times and everything else like that. You're gonna call that into us. The officer may have been there 2 or 3 times and did what I did as a rookie, wagged the finger and left. But you're calling that in, so now we're getting that report and we're assessing it. And we're going, hey, what we got? Okay, what's the functioning over there? Lots of domestic violence? Did you ever notice alcohol? Well, I see a lot of beer cans in the yard, but I don't know the family that well. I don't know. We're starting to put together this puzzle. That's probably gonna hit his radar or my radar or whatever to say, we might send a worker out there. So you're gonna get a different response from CPS than you're gonna get from law enforcement in a lot of cases. But as he says, when we're working with our community partners, some of them are so ingrained the way we think and we are that they're gonna call us. And others, not so much.
Rural communities, smaller communities, it's just harder. There's a different process that happens there, and it's just kind of how it is. You know, you try to kind of work with that, but you know, you also have the fact that there's different people, you know, even with our workers. You know, getting workers to go out to somebody's house and not try to determine and work with that family based on what their value system is and how they were brought up and what their training, well, that's the trick, because that's not where they're coming from as people. So they're going out there with a preset piece, Well, very few of them were probably raised under those same conditions, so are their expectations that that needs to change gonna be high? Yeah. So, how do you moderate some of that? Because we deal with people who are in major poverty, who are major kinds of mental health and other kinds of medical issues, major kind of financial issues. Lucky if they know where them and their family is going to be sleeping tonight in some cases, have no income, depend on the kids, potentially Social Security for income. So if they don't have the kids, oh my God, you're taking my kids. Well, I just now put them out on the street because they have no money coming in.
If you get a chance, read a book called Generational Poverty. It'll kind of give you some insight into that zone, and you'll realize that you're working with people like it. This is the person who wins the lottery, and you think, gosh, the guy's got $1 million, and 3 years later they're back to living in the box. Okay, there's a way that people think when they're there. If you have it, spend it. If you don't have it, someone else will provide it for you, type thing. And there's kind of a different culture, a different mindset.
Well, and we've had cases that, there's been an accident and there's a major financial payout for that family. You say, well, okay, we got them now maybe to a place that things could normal. Never seen people go through money so fast in your life, getting stuff that they don't need, but here and gone in $60,000 in a month and a half. And they're now right back on the street.
Dana too is going to be talking to our group, and she does a really neat presentation on this very thing.
I have a related question.
Sure.
You touched a little bit on how law enforcement might refer something to you. When somebody goes out on say a priority 1, do they take law enforcement with them, or what's the incidence of one of your CPS folks coming across something that they have to or should report to law enforcement?
It can be pretty bad.
It depends on what we get coming in from the initial information. We have sometimes the reporter will say, I really believe that there was drug apparatus there and drugs there and people were acting really inappropriate, and so I think there's use. I'm not going to send one of my workers out to do that on their own. If it's during the day, myself or a police officer will go with them. We won't let them go by themselves. If we go into certain communities, we cover Stickney Creek. The police don't even go by themselves to Stickney Creek, okay?
Where is it? Yeah.
It's up there on
Going by
the
trade.
road,
Where
frontage
is it?
road. We bike past it.
Where is it? It's where?
Up past Wolf Point area, and it's back up in the hills, and when you get up there, you got everybody living in whatever they're living in. Everybody pretty much has a sidearm with them most of the time, and if they don't know you, you really don't want to knock on the door unless you really have to. We don't send people there without a police officer, okay? We're not allowed to carry weapons, so they're going with a police officer, okay? At nighttime, when some of our staff get called out in certain situations, our staff is really pretty good. They've been there long enough, some of them, to the fact that we know a lot of the families, and a lot of this is generational. We've been dealing with some of these families for 3-4 generations, unfortunately. Okay? We know them. We know we can go to that house, we can knock on that door, and we really don't have to worry about it. In some cases, they're glad to see us and they invite us in, and it's a totally, thank God you're here. In other cases, if my staff have that even on weekends when we rotate our on call, they'll call and say, okay, I just got this call out, really concerned about what I'm hearing, or there could be a group of 4 kids. Well, if I got a group of 4 kids, I can't send one worker out there if they may have to take those kids. One worker can't take 4 kids out of a home. I'm going with them. Or our group is really good enough here, and we're lucky with that. Most of my staff can contact you. They'll call another worker that they think may know that family or has worked with that family. And even though that staff person isn't on call, if they're free, they'll go with them. So, you know,
Yeah, it's one of those things that's difficult, getting back to your original question. If I see a crime, what's my duty to report? Well, the duty to report goes to us, but it doesn't necessarily reciprocate in kind. Law enforcement does have a bug about that. I understand that from being from that side of the house. If they see child abuse and neglect, or what they suspect is child abuse and neglect, they are mandated reports, they have to report. If I go in the house and I'm talking with the kids and the family and there's 14 VCRs or there's 15 stereos or there's all this stuff laying around or whatever it is, I don't have the same duty to report to law enforcement. But that said, if there's something going on that I know is going to become a law enforcement issue, we do work with our law enforcement. That's why we have CPT, the
child protection team.
right, and then the MDT, which is kind of a bigger version of it. But they're teams that come together with law enforcement, county attorneys, public health, school,
Sheriff.
yep, sheriff and everything, where we can, under a banner of confidentiality, staff these issues. Because we don't want to get into that little push and tug, my information, your information. We want to work together to the best that we can.
If my staff walks into a home and sees drug paraphernalia or drugs on the table, they're to turn around, walk back out of that home, and call the police.
Where it gets difficult is, I went out on one of my first meth cases, and I was the on-call social worker, and so I had my on-call gear and my car, and my child seats all loaded and everything, and that thing rings at 3 in the morning, you know, and sure enough, I get this call from CI and got this, so I jump in the car because I'm used to this stuff, and I go zipping up there, and the deputies and everybody are still on scene. Well, first off, I show up, and I get out of the car, and they're like, CPS? I said, yeah. I said, never seen you guys show up so fast. So I said, well, I'm kind of, different breed of hero. So when I go in there, go to talk to the family and everything, and the first thing the cop does is he pulls out the kids and he says, you see this guy? This guy's CPS. You ever want to see this kid again, you better start talking to us. Took me quite a while to reestablish my rapport.
Hence our relationship with
guy.
the community.
Yeah. So our law enforcement partners have to work with us and we have to work with them, but it's all about education. And so we have to talk, we talk to our workers like you said, you see something, turn around, walk back out, try and get help. But the same applies to them. They need to understand what our role is and not put us in a box where we don't want to go. So.
That's a great story.
Let me get to some of the dry stuff in statute because I know you're going to need to know this, and I know we talked about a little bit about the policy, and I know the state of Montana. I won't bore you with the stuff, and I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint. So I'm going to go through these things.
Here, next Tuesday night, to run through the statute.
Oh, good. I don't have to do it. Woohoo! I'm free. Okay, so then with like we're getting back to, we make a mandated report, we get involved, we get to the point where we're going to file, and we file, and that's where you're going to be engaged. Okay, and then often you're going to end up, well, very possibly. I've seen a lot of cases where the judge will just, I've seen them where they put you on the stand, and I've seen them judges just turn to you and, guardian, your opinion, and and so you talk that way. So different courts do it differently. But the thing of it is, and I had one case once where, and you're going to get, sooner or later, you're going to get the worker that you're not going to agree. Okay, and that's perfectly cool. Because we could sit in the room, Dennis and I and a couple workers and everything, and determine whether we should have removed or not, and we might come up with, it's one of the biggest areas of, I call shades of gray in CPS, because things change, and kind of what Bill was alluding to, my standards, his standards, everybody's standards are different. So we got to get back to some root issues, the law, and that's where SAMS comes in. Safety, is there a safety issue? Is it present danger? Is it impending danger? What's the risk? okay, and what can you do with it? So I was involved in a case where I had a mom who, for some reason, she had divorced the wild boyfriend years ago and was fine for like 2.5 years. And then she had remarried, the kids were in a nice home, things were fine. For some reason, one night, he shows up in town, she goes back. There's a huge fight in front of the children, there's drug use. She punched the windshield of a car and drove her fist right through it. I mean, and the kids saw it, and there was blood, and there was everything else, so there was a filing. Worker went out there, did a removal. I was the ongoing worker, so I ended up getting the case. I'm going into my second week of MCAN training, and so as I'm leaving to go to MCAN, I get a phone call that says, Dad is dead. The actual birth father, not the stepfather. The actual birth father has overdosed and he's dead. So I went back into court after getting this information and calling the family, and I went back into court a week later or so, and everybody was like, okay, we're done, you can dismiss now. And I'm sitting there with the county attorney, and I'm going, why am I dismissing? Because I put a petition to, for temporary legal custody, and that's what the intake worker did, and so this is the path we're going, and I said, well, why? And even the guardian ad litem and everybody else was like, yeah, why? He's dead, she's admitted her mistake, she wants to go back to their husband. I said, but doesn't anybody want to know why you would live with somebody, leave that lifestyle, live for like 2.5 years with your kids and grow up in this family, and then one night grab your kids and everything else and leave this good house and go back to this ugly situation? And then this horrific violent act occurs, there's drug use and the kids are exposed. Shouldn't there be a question asked here? And I was a rookie, so I'm kind of looking around. So I ended up, everybody was like, all the fingers came my way. And, even my CASA disagreed. And I talked for a long time, but I said, I just can't see not staying involved. And so it ended up going to court, and we ended up getting temporary legal custody. And I was out of the case pretty quick. I mean, it didn't take long. We addressed concerns that Mom had, some old issues she had never dealt with, some very traumatic issues. She got to a therapist, she got things done. And both the CASA was engaged, I was engaged, they were talking to the kids, made we call them stabilization plan, had the kids with grandma, and 5 at night, you've been out there, the placement's coming apart and you don't want to lose them, so you go out there and you do a stabilization plan, you're talking with the family, you're trying to say what's going wrong. Little things, like the 7-year-old, if Grandma would just knock on my door before she came to my room, now, fine, let's put that in the contract. Grandma, you willing to sign on it? And sit around the coffee table and make a plan so the family works it out. Long story short, at the end of this long train, we dismiss, Mom's better and he's leaving. This lady comes down, and it was at one of the meetings, and they were ending something at one of the last parenting classes or something. She came down to the office, and she hated me vehemently, I could tell, but she came down to the office and she said just a few words, and she said, you know what, I never, ever, now that we're dismissed, I never want to see you, anybody like you, anybody deal with anything ever again. Never. And then she turned back and she goes, that said, thank you. And she walked away. So, you're going to have those times when you get into all this ugly mess, and you're going to get into difficult situations, and you're going to get into disagreements with therapists and social workers and everything, but you're all looking at the same goal. Well, one of these days, somebody's going to turn to you, or some kid's going to turn to you and say thank you. And that's where it's all going to pay off, right there. You're going to look at that and say, greatest move I ever could have made. So remember that and look for that day, because it will occur. It'll be few and far between, trust me, but it will occur. And so I think when you get into a situation, especially like this, you're unfamiliar with the territory, but ask the questions, challenge. I didn't mind being challenged. The CASA thought I was wrong, and we talked it out. Not at all did I mind. And I could have been totally wrong. Like I said, I was a rookie, I was starting out. But the bottom line is, don't go with the status quo, don't go with this, look at your statutes, deal with your training, ask the questions, ask them to your peers, ask them to Bill, ask a dentist, ask me or whomever. And if you think your decision's right and you're there, the voice of the child, we're not, as a department, we're not asking you to do it our way. We're asking you to be the voice of the child, and that's what you say you're wanting to do. And so we realize that sometimes you and I are going to disagree, and that's perfectly cool. So, just,
Please remember that we don't have to agree all the time. It's okay. Doesn't mean we're not gonna like you any less. It doesn't, and those issues have come up. I mean, we've had to work through some of those issues at times.
yeah.
It's okay. In the 9 years that I know Bill and I have worked together, I think there's only really been, one case that we've had to go back to court, and we were actually on opposite sides as far as CASA and the department. Normally, we're pretty close most of the time. On this one case, they were petitioning the court to terminate rights, and we were fighting for the parents. Real unusual, and really through the judge, because that's not usually how it goes. We lost. Okay, CASA won. The judge deemed that there was too much time frame, no matter how good the parents were doing at that point in time. Too much time had taken place. It was not in the kid's best interest to keep working with the parents. Move on.
Permanency becomes a big deal. One of the things that we're taught as workers, and like I said, part of the SAMS thing and part of getting into it, you've probably heard one worker, one case. The idea is that it doesn't stop with a knock on the door, it doesn't stop with the investigation, it doesn't stop with temporary legal custody. It stops when the child has a permanent home. Whether it's a home the child was in originally, or whether it's another home. Permanency is what we're after. That's the end game, is getting these children in a permanent place, a family that will love them, nurture them, and take care of them like they should be. That could very well be the drug-using father. And that's why statute directs us, look at the non-custodial parent. And some of the things we got dinged on in the CFSR review was not looking at the non-custodial parent. But you have to offer people the chance. You have to offer them treatment plans. You have to do these other things. And so we need to make those efforts. And finding family out there and bringing family in. The statute recently changed as far as who we could contact. It used to be, we got to get mom or dad's permission to contact grandma to tell them what's going on. So we don't have to do that anymore. It's part of statute now that we can make those efforts to find those family connections. They don't want grandma to know. Well, we do want grandma to know, okay? Because she might be the stabilizing factor in your life. And when we come together at those family identification meetings and those family group decision-making meetings, that's where, especially when we're having a second or third meeting and you're on board, really like you there. Really like to have you. And you're there as the voice of the child, but you're seeing this family dynamic and you're seeing these people and what's going on.
So, do you guys keep us then informed of those kinds of things? I mean, how do we know
Yeah.
about those?
Yeah, you'll get a notice.
Yeah, you'll get
Okay.
notices for
As soon
meetings.
as you're appointed, the department receives notice who the cost is on the case.
And then I send out you guys reminders for court hearings and family groups and
Foster care review.
and-
Foster care reviews, all those things.
Okay.
And I tried, as soon as somebody's on the case, even like I've had ICWA cases and I had a CASA and I had the tribe and everything, it's just mind-boggling the things you do, and some things you do drop. You forget to invite, or you forget to do this, you forget to do that. So we try and have all those checks and balances, but sometimes we miss it. So if you hear something's coming up, and you're like, hey, I did, jump in and ring our bell and say, hey, this is what's going down, and are you having an FCRC on this? Because I'm the CASA on this case. And when is the next FCRC on this, or whatever? Feel free to ask the questions, because we do drop the ball. I gotta admit it, it
And
happens.
and if you call my workers and, you called them twice, 3 times, and they haven't returned your call, call me. Because lots of times, they're not there, they're out in the field, okay? We have to see kids we have in care once a month in the home. Depending on what's happening with the kid, we may be out at the school, at a doctor's appointment, any number of other things, seeing that child, working with the family, going out on new investigations or reports. We're not in the office a lot.
And it's best to email
Yeah,
Mhm.
email is definitely
with this.
the easiest way to
Yeah.
get
Better way to
a
do this.
response in some cases.
How many workers are there?
There will be, hopefully by the end of October, 11 to cover that 4-county area.
We have, not only do you have turnover, because let's face it, everything has a life expectancy. And what I tell people when they're doing this, nobody does this because this is the job that you wanted to get rich at. You certainly don't do it for the wonderful benefit package. You do it because your heart happens to be in this line of work. You happen to have a desire, a drive, a passion, whatever it is to do this. That's what has them in that zone and doing that. And if we can provide them, because that, I mean, if you look at like Dennis when I was a field supervisor, not only is he their supervisor, let me give you some insight. Some days he's their therapist. Some days he's their buddy. Some days he's their sergeant. Some days, you know, he wears a variety of hats. Supervision and Child Protective Service is one of the strangest bailiwicks I have ever been in as a supervisor, and I have probably over 25 years of supervisory experience in various areas. From retail management to military to law enforcement, I mean, and this is the strangest beast I've ever been a supervisor in. Because once you leave that worker role and move to supervisor, the whole ball game changes. So it's not that, and skill sets don't transfer. You can be an excellent field worker and a really crummy supervisor. And by the same token, I know some real good supervisors in the field right now who, when I worked with this girl, we were like office mates, and so we kind of paired off on each other's cases, knew what was going on, so something went down with hers while she was away, I'd run out and handle it. She'd handle mine and everything. She was about as disorganized as you could get, barely made her timelines on things. Her hairdryer was in the corner, her stacks of paper were everywhere, and of course I came out of the military, my office was neat and all this. So we were just opposites. So we were the work spouse for a while. She was my work spouse when I was there. So, but we come to work and we had this dynamic that worked. And when she went to supervision, she hit her click. I mean, she is good. She was really, really good. And I'm glad she's still with us. She's up in the Great Falls office right now. She was a rural supervisor. But it's a different beast all its own. And Dennis can probably tell you all the things he has to do as supervisor that just don't fit into what you would think a normal supervisor would do.
Well, and this is a people process. Well, the reality is my staff are people too. They have just as many problems and issues and concerns in their personal life as some of the people that they're working with. So there are days that, you know what, maybe you need to go home and take care of some of your own issues instead of being here trying to take care of these people, because you're not really being very effective here today because of what's going on for you. So yeah, you start to have to juggle those issues and the priorities, and you don't want to burn them out, because if you burn them out, then it's a big juggling act. That this is a people thing. You're dealing with people. There is no, it follows these steps. It doesn't follow any steps.
And some of the things that come up on your radar, I mean, you might see where maybe the worker looks a little too enmeshed. You know, maybe they're like, give Dennis a call. I know what's your perception. Sometimes perception's all there is. But, you know.
Yeah, I kind of have a concern. You know, you said the voice of the child, and we talked about speaking in the child's best interest. But really, I mean, I feel like all I could do now is give my perspective. And for all you know, I could be, you know, completely crazy. You know, you don't know. I don't know anything about.
We are
child
crazy.
development. Yes, you know what I mean? It's like, right? You really, you know, and so. You know, I don't know, the example you gave about a child being away too long from the birth parents. You know, I don't know how long's too long for a child at a different age. You know, Bill, can we come and talk to you about these cases? I mean, because it's very, I just don't think I don't know enough to.
A lot of times we end up staffing with
Yep.
the dentist and the social worker and just getting different perspectives, or talking to the therapist. You know, there's just a lot of resource that's surrounding
So
these cases.
It is it's more than just
Yeah,
a
it's not
citizen's
just you
perspective
making
on what's going on. We are
absolutely.
collecting it, okay.
Well, my gut tells me this. That's kind of what it feels like.
And sometimes, yeah, you're going on things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the statute grounds you. You know, your job and the regulations, the rules, the policies, the procedures, and everything are all what's going to, you know, kind of hold some of those links together. But the other line is, it's like you can be the voice of reason, but you're dealing with best interest. I had an attorney once appointed to a child, and this girl was. I removed her from her mom, and I removed this girl's daughter from her. So, all in one fell swoop. Okay? And so she was, at the time, 16, and I had a 13-year-old on my case, by the way, with an 18-month-old child.
Oh my God.
I did. I kind of gravitated toward the teenagers. We'll do that in offices as dentists. You know, we don't specialize per se, but I did well with teenage groups. I had teenage daughters of my own at the time, and so I kind of knew that link. And I don't know if it was a father thing or whatever it is, but I could handle the explosions and the drama and everything else like that. And I'm like, get in the car, you know, and yelling at me across the parking lot. And I'm just like screaming her name, and she's screaming, "I'm getting in the car." That move, and you know you got them when they go, and they go stomping their feet that they're coming, or they go on the run and you text them, and they text you back and say, "Shopko, go back to school. I'll see you there in 10 minutes." You know. And they do. They respond differently. So anyway, back to the original thing. You get into a situation where, you know, you're looking at perspectives. You're looking at things that are a little bit different. You're looking at what's working out for that family or what isn't. But you are under the gun of the law, and that's kind of what he was talking about. You know, 15 months, 15 out of 22. The presumption is by statute, this isn't going to go back together. But we all know, just like I said earlier, the best kids are raised in the best circumstances after they've been taken out of that. If you don't have those family links to tell them why mom was that way or why dad was that way, they're going to leave sooner or later. When they're on their own, when they're 18, they're going to try and go back and figure out what went on. So that's kind of one of those keep in mind too.
And I have kept cases as long as 3 years. Not necessarily to the judge's pleasure, but after 15 months, I have to keep justifying to the judge why I want to continue to work with that family. And these families were